Welcome to Bible Knowledge. Today we will address an important and sometimes difficult to understand topic. How do you know if you are called by God? Understanding God's calling can completely change our lives and set us on a path of faith and relationship with Him. In this video, we will explore Bible verses as well as life events that may indicate that God is calling you. We will also use metaphors to make this important topic easier to understand. Let's begin. Let's first define what it means to be called by God. In the Bible, being called means that God sets you apart for a specific task, purpose, or relationship with Him. In Romans 8:28-30 it says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. For those God foreknew, He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son, that He might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those He predestined, He also called. Those He called, He also justified. Those He justified, He also glorified." This verse shows us that those who are called by God are part of a greater plan that God has predetermined. When God calls you, it is a confirmation that He has given you a specific purpose. It is a sign that God has a plan for your life, and He is calling you to follow His will and develop a deeper relationship with Him. There are many ways that people can experience God's call in their lives, and as we will see, it can range from joyful experiences to times of suffering that bring you closer to Him. One of the most common ways people experience God's call is through difficult times. This could be through problems in your life, loss of stability, or even health issues. When life becomes challenging and you don't understand why everything seems to be going wrong, this could be a sign that God is calling you. In James 1:2-4 it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." This passage shows that trials can shape us and make us stronger in our faith. God often uses difficult moments in our lives to draw us closer to Him. When you go through pain or suffering, it may be a way that God is calling you to seek Him and develop a deeper connection with Him. A metaphor that illustrates this process is that of a potter molding clay. To make a beautiful and useful vessel, the potter must knead, shape, and sometimes even start over. This is how God works in our lives. He sometimes breaks down what we were to shape us into what we need to be in His eyes. This process can be painful, but it is always aimed at our ultimate good. Jesus Himself taught us that suffering can be a path to redemption and calling. In Matthew 16:24 He says, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." Through difficult times, we learn to fully surrender to God's plan and deny ourselves, trusting completely in His providence and guidance. Health is one of the most valuable things in life, and losing your health can have a profound impact on a person. Often God uses health problems to bring us closer to Him. Anxiety, panic attacks, or sleepless nights can be signs that God is calling you to focus your attention on Him. In Psalm 34:18 it says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." This verse shows that when we are at our lowest, God is near. He sees our pain and invites us to come to Him for comfort and healing. Many people who have gone through health problems or anxiety testify that this was a turning point in their lives, leading them to a deep dependence on God. When someone is faced with anxiety or panic, it is often a time when they begin to search for answers, and sometimes even without realizing it, they are being led to God. An example of this is how many people, even non-believers, in times of desperation, begin to call out to a higher power, sometimes unsure if it will help. But this can be the moment when God intervenes and reveals Himself. A metaphor to understand this is that of a lamp that only stands out in the darkness. When everything in life is going well, we may feel that we don't need God's light. But when we go through dark times, God's light becomes much clearer, and we are drawn to it. Another way we can recognize God's call is through certain life circumstances. Sometimes things happen in our lives that we don't understand, Everything seems to be going wrong. Work, relationships, finances. This could be a sign that God is trying to wake you up, get your attention, and call you back to Him. In Proverbs 3:5-6, we read, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight." This verse teaches us that we don't always need to understand everything, but we can trust God to show us the right way, especially when everything seems to be falling apart. God sometimes allows things to happen that bring us to our knees so we can recognize our dependence on Him. A common example of this is when someone loses everything they value, material possessions, social status, or security. This can be very confusing and painful, but it can also be a moment when God is calling us to let go of what is keeping us from Him and focus completely on Him. A metaphor that illustrates this is that of a gardener pruning a tree. Sometimes a tree needs to be pruned to grow healthier and stronger. The branches that are in the way must be removed. In the same way, God sometimes prunes the things in our lives that distract us from His plan. It may be painful, but it leads to growth and flourishing. In addition to difficult moments, God also uses moments of inner peace and guidance to call us. When you are in prayer and begin to experience peace and clarity about a situation, this can be a sign that He is calling you to a specific purpose. In Colossians 3:15 it says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace, and be thankful." Peace in your heart is often a sign that you are on the right path and that God is guiding you in the direction He wants you to go. Sometimes God calls us not through storms or suffering, but through a gentle voice of peace and certainty in our hearts. An example of this could be when someone feels they need to make a big decision, moving, starting a new job, or even starting a ministry. If you bring that decision to God in prayer and feel a deep peace and confidence in the direction you are heading, this can be a confirmation that God is leading you. A metaphor for this kind of calling is that of a compass. A compass always points north, giving us a sense of direction even in the midst of uncertainty. This is how the peace of God works in our lives. It acts as a spiritual compass, pointing us in the right direction, even when we don't have full clarity on what lies ahead. We must remember that God's calling is unique for each person and can happen in different ways. Not everyone will experience the same kind of calling, and not everyone will be called at the same time in their life. God knows each of us individually and knows what is best for each of us. Some people experience an immediate, powerful calling. They feel suddenly drawn to God through a dramatic event, like Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus, described in Acts 9. Others, like the prophet Samuel, were called in a quiet way when God called him in the night, 1 Samuel 3. Both examples show that God calls people in the way that suits them best. In John 6:44, Jesus says, "No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws them, and I will raise them up at the last day." This verse shows that God draws us to Him in His perfect timing. Whether it happens through joyful experiences, difficult moments, or quiet callings, it is always aimed at bringing us closer to Him. A metaphor for this process is the story of a shepherd leading his flock. Sometimes the shepherd calls his sheep by name and they follow him willingly. At other times the shepherd must intervene, such as when a sheep wanders off and is in danger. This is how it is with God's calling. Sometimes it is gentle and inviting, and at other times He must rescue us from the circumstances we have wandered into so we can return to His care. When we respond to God's call, it always brings change in our lives, but it also leads to blessing. God does not call us without purpose. He wants to guide us to a life of fulfillment, peace, and spiritual growth. His calling is always meant to bring us to a deeper level of faith and trust. In Ephesians 2:10 it says, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." God has a plan for each of us, and when we respond to His call, we step into the good works that He has prepared for us. This doesn't mean it will always be easy, but it does mean that we will experience God's blessing and guidance as we follow His plan for our lives. Once you recognize and respond to God's calling, you will find that your life is led in a new direction. This may mean leaving behind old habits, growing in your faith, or discovering a new purpose in life that you hadn't seen before. An important aspect of God's calling is that it always brings us closer to Him. As it says in Jeremiah 29:11-13. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. This is God's promise for everyone who seeks him. When we respond to his call, we will find him and experience a deeper understanding of his love and guidance. In summary, we can say that God's calling can appear in many different ways in our lives. Whether it's through difficult times, health problems, life changes, or inner peace, God's calling is always aimed at drawing us closer to him and fulfilling his plan for our lives. The Bible shows us that God knows each of us and that his calling always comes at the perfect time. It is important to pay attention to the signs and events in our lives because God can speak through these circumstances. Sometimes he must break us down to rebuild us, and at other times he speaks gently, leading us to his will through peace and certainty. When you recognize God's call and respond to it, your life will change. You will come to know him on a deeper level and experience how he guides, protects, and blesses you. If you have doubts or are unsure if you are being called, seek God's guidance in prayer and pay attention to the signs in your life. Thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with friends and family. Let's continue to grow together in our faith and relationship with God. See you next time, and God bless.